Deep down, you know that you're the only person who knows the answer to the question of what will make you happy. What would you actually enjoy? What sort of a job or career will give you satisfaction? But how do you go about answering that question? How do you tap inside yourself? How do you allow yourself to think intuitively and come to an answer? Well, that's what we talk about in this episode. I'm Jeremy Klein, and this is Change Work Life. And welcome to Change Work Life, where we're all about beating the Sunday evening blues and enjoying Mondays again. Now, if you've listened to episode 63 with David Frank Gomes, you'll know that coaching isn't really about advising or telling you what to do, but it's much more about helping you find the answer from within by following your own intuition. That's what we're going to cover in today's episode. And to help me do that, I'm joined by Transformational life coach, Mareike Schoenig. Mareike, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Can you start by telling me what a transformational life coach is, what you do, and who are your clients?
Transformation is basically the explanation of change. Life coaching is supporting people in any kind of transition and any kind of changing situations and life moments where they feel they are kind of stuck, or it's like they don't find the way out of that particular situation on their own. And the life coach is working together with them as a reflection board to unveil what is invisible for them, to be able to grow stronger and grow bigger and grow more powerful and get more clarity and more inner wisdom to kind of solve a certain crisis or a threatening or inconvenient life situation with pleasure and joy, and to make the life afterwards even more grateful. And also in my coaching in particular, focus on not only the one-time success for that one particular situation I have with them, but is prepping them for the future. So whenever they hit into the same situation again, or they run into the same scenario again, that they kind of have been through that before and they have transformed towards someone else so that they can take that with more ease for the future. Because in the end, life is all about giving us opportunities and giving us options and giving us possibilities to learn and to see and to reflect what exactly I can grow towards, to put it in those words.
And who are your typical clients? Do you focus on a particular niche?
I do. Being an expert for a couple of years or a long time myself, I focus on international corporate employees. So people who work at big companies and have an international career, who are the ones that easily feel stuck because sometimes they're tied up in a contract and they need to find ways and solutions that make the daily work life very fulfilled, or that they feel like they want to make it feel fulfilled.
And can you tell me a bit about your own story? I mean, every coach I've spoken to never started out as a career coach. There's always been a career that they started with beforehand. So where were you before you became a coach?
At the very beginning, I was a university student and I studied computer science, always in the field of medical research and medical equipment, post-processing solutions for example, computer tomography systems and so on. And I loved it. I found myself very proud doing it. But once I finished this university course, I could never imagine myself being a full-time programmer and being full-time employed, simply sitting down in front of my desk and hacking structured and guidance, like through a computed language, into something that creates an output. So I looked for a company who was open to train graduates from university toward more of management positions and more like the whole economic topic. So I started with Siemens that time, and that was a beautiful start to begin with. I always had the urge of live internationally and just travel around the world and just be in different countries. And with Siemens, as an international company, I really had the chance to do that. Until finally I managed to end up in Singapore. That was maybe 7 years back now. And I kind of really loved it. And I urged the freedom of being part of a brilliant city and the world. And I still found my place. But I was never really truly happy. The work situation had like so many different struggles holding back for me. And I couldn't really overcome them myself. And I was really at the unhappiest place in my life ever. So eventually I decided to, after I finished the contract in Singapore to start working. And also I found myself pregnant, and I took that time to reflect. And I always had this inner feeling that I wanted to be like working on my own, and I wanted to be on my own and to be out of this directing manager situation. And I tried various different ideas, but none of them would stick until one day I met a mom who was doing parenting coaching, and she would just guide the parents through very basic tricks, how you can actually coach your toddler. And I found that so fascinating. And I mean, my toddler was very young that day and that time. But the moment I got in touch with that topic, I felt such a strong urge of going and doing and learning more. And I just wanted to be part of that I just signed up for the same course she signed up. And ever since, everything just progressed naturally. And here I am today working as a coach.
In hindsight, what was going wrong when you were in Singapore? If you could sort of put your finger on it and describe it in a couple of sentences, what was it that was wrong with that for you?
Looking back, I do think there were a lot of wrong things in my own mindset, and I took roles and accepted of being a victim and just staying for the money, and all that triggered by feeling strongly overwhelmed and strongly not being able to deal with the demands that were totally unrealistic in some cases, and the indifferences that were consequences out of the differences of the target not meeting the targets and stuff. What really, really, really got me wrong at the first place, and that's something I really ignored, and that is also the origin of why I do what I do today, is like, I remember before going to Singapore, they were allowing me to go on a small orientation trip just to look and see, to see what everything is like. And I touched base in Singapore and I didn't feel it. I was like, this is not where you want to be. But this inner urge in me, probably my ego, was so strong. It just wanted to be abroad, and I wanted this kind of a lifestyle with like basically accepting all kinds of consequences as long as I would just finally be abroad again. And having like not really given my intuition and my inner feelings the attention at that early phase I was in, it would have saved me a lot of tears and a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of exhaustion, a lot of fights within the company and all that. But I wasn't giving it attention. So looking back, I think it's a mixture of not looking what my inside has actually communicated to me, I was aware of, but I was deciding against it, and a mixture of exhaustion and unrealistic targets and all those kind of things that turn you into a crisis.
So you mentioned there intuition, which is really the topic that I want to talk about with you. So we're talking about looking inside and starting with your own feelings and being guided by your own intuition. It's one of those things which risks sounding perhaps a little bit woo-woo, and people kind of listen to it and they don't really know. They kind of go, okay, so what does that mean? I mean, what does that look like practically? What does it mean if someone is looking at their own feelings and their own intuition?
In our times where we do live in the society and like how we bring up kids and how we just run a business, a lot of things are derived from our mind, and the mind is taking over tasks of making decisions and choosing that are not necessarily supposed to be taken. I do think as small human beings, as we are, we have greater access towards direction and towards making choices, which way to go, than just our mind. It is just that from an early childhood onwards, many of us are raised in a way that feelings and emotions and what we feel is toned down or not accepted in a certain situation. So they're not given the room it is needed in order to really process them and to kind of get them out of our bodies again, and to kind of feel this inner peace when, and this okayness and the satisfaction when those feelings are out of us. But only when we reach that certain stage of having a clean inside. And that means that we know what we're feeling, and we have learned how to progress them, and we have learned to accept them and deal with them. We kind of get to a point where we are still inside, and then we are able to listen to what else is there than just our mind telling us very dominantly sometimes.
Can you go into a bit more detail about what you mean by having a clean inside? I mean, what does that look like? What is someone's sort of state of mind or state of thought when they have a clean inside?
The state of thought is a very reflective one. It is that it's a very aware and a very mindful one. When you are in a cleanness or calmness, and you've reached this point where you're not a victim to your external world, where you're not thrown from your feelings from one extreme place to the other, but you're able to notice them as early and as small as they sometimes are. You can process them, and processing feeling means like acknowledging them. It means getting them out of your body again in a way with the time that they maybe demand and need. And if you're able to do that, you're very reflective in a way that you can see what's happening around you, and you just observe so much more because you're not busy with your own insights and your own thoughts, but you can finally see and reflect. And you also will recognize a lot more in what thrives or throws other people around you when you are reaching that inner state of calmness and peace.
So is this a state where you're kind of constantly in this kind of phase of reflection and inner peace, or is this something which you're trying to get there so you can, I don't know, like turn it on when you need it?
Yeah, I don't think in 100% being able to achieve that inner phase and inner state myself. Life is still, I would say, throwing opportunities at me to see and test my inner stability. But I have learned through coaching and through looking into myself and with allowing things to happen that there are many deeper layers in my personality that can actually bring some clarity and bring some additional notice towards me. I think I lost the question halfway through. Can you repeat that?
It's whether you're looking to kind of get to this, I don't know, permanent Zen-like state where that is the state you are in the whole of your days, or is this, it's like a tool in the toolkit, so when you are feeling a bit frazzled, you recognize it and you're able to call upon this state, if you like. Is it more that?
Yeah, so it's an everyday training, first of all, to be able to be trained on that and to build that skill again. It's nothing that came naturally to me. And that is like, if you run a marathon, you need to do, and to be able to be in that state of running a marathon, you need to train for it every day until you're one day able. But are you running the marathon 24/7? You're not. You're just picking it as, the competition is up. And this is what I do. Everything is a choice. And if I feel like life is exhausting, and if I feel like my mind is just bringing me to stages where I feel like it's not as easy as it is usually, I just pick my tool. But sometimes the way back can even take me days. And it's like, because everybody gets mixed up easily. And I wouldn't say it's a constant 24/7 Zen, me meditating in front of I'm still living a normal life, but I've learned to deal with bringing myself back. And the struggle, I'm coming back maybe to why I work with people who feel like what they're doing for work is not fulfilling them, or maybe they even find themselves in a crisis. A crisis is a felt or emotional situation or a state of being where we almost feel impossible to just put ourselves back into this inner stability and into this inner peace of ourselves. And being able to do that one time and being able to learn that skill just makes you crisis proven for your future in a way.
It sounds like it links quite a lot with things like sort of mindfulness, meditation and that kind of thing. Is there a strong link between what you're talking about and those sorts of practices?
Meditation is something for me where I feel like it's muting things, where I have the ability to put whatever I have inside to the side and just keep it at a pause for a moment. Mindfulness is somehow, in a way, the first step towards it. I believe living a mindful life and giving attention to the small things and giving the things that are happening around and especially within me is definitely the first step towards getting back to the intuition and using that as a tool for our life.
Say someone is in the position that you found yourself in when you were in this unhappy state. So when you were in Singapore, working for a big corporate, in a state where you just knew that you weren't enjoying your job and you weren't enjoying life. What should someone who finds himself in that position do first to begin this journey to tapping into their intuition?
The first step is always believing that there is a different way, or that there's a different style of living, and that there's another way, that this is not the reality and it has to be like that forever, and that work is all about fighting. And the first way is really to start believing that there's something better waiting for you, and that there's not accepting the difficult and comprehensive life situation in you, but believing in that there's something better. But because without belief, and sometimes people struggle, they just really see nothing than darkness and the heavy fights. And it's so difficult for them to refocus towards something. But working on the belief is the first thing, because the belief is the natural magnet.
Well, how do you get there? I mean, if you are, really sort of in the thick of it, really run down in, as you say, sort of a dark place, and you might have got to the stage where you think that this is just the way work is, this is what it's always going to be like. I mean, how do you start to shift your mindset to one of belief that there is another way?
I think it is not done by simply saying that. I think it's also like a little bit of reflective work and some toolings and some system behind that is very individual to everyone's own personality that looking into it. For instance, if you find yourself in a dark place and I think dark place also sounds a bit like unhealthy already. Like a coaching, we still work with people that are very, very healthy and able to demand and to satisfy the demands of life. But for instance, if you find yourself happening in a situation where you're extremely unfulfilled and extremely unhappy, and you're just constantly exposed to a situation you feel like you can't handle anymore, being able to use a coach in a way to talk all those things through and to reflect them on your own and to reflect them with them and to find what is that one belief or what is that one habit or what is that one individual thing inside of you that is holding you back towards maybe believing. This can be that, for instance, your parents told you that is just the way work is, or that you believe the money you're earning in right now is only able to be earned in that one particular job. And there are many underlying assumptions that hold us back from believing or only starting to imagining a change. I do believe visioning, and that is also something I just love myself a lot, visioning a future with no constraints and no difficulties. And if there would be like no issues with money and everything, what that would look like, and just embrace that on a daily basis, or kind of build that one small seed towards making a bigger vision and giving it more room in my daily life, is also something that maybe can help at the very beginning to only, just sit down and envision.
So is getting to a stage of belief as much about sort of demolishing the obstacles that we've set for ourselves as much as anything else? So taking those limiting beliefs, which is a phrase that comes up time and time again, working out what your limiting beliefs are and sort of acknowledging that they are limiting beliefs, they're not necessarily a reality.
Yeah. And also then work, and if you choose, or the coachee chooses to work towards changing them, towards supporting ones. And I mean, limiting beliefs is one thing. There are also clashes of values, like getting transparency about what you're actually believing in and what drives you on a big mission. Like, what are your values that kind of keep you working? There are also things like, and also a lot of feelings that are just simply stuck inside of you that can hold you back towards believing as well.
So I think we've touched on this already, but once you have found this belief that things can change, what's the next step to starting to make that change for you? And presumably you need to identify where you're looking to get to.
Well, there are a couple of things for you to be ready to be in a change. So it has to be the right time. It has to be committed to it. You need to believe in it and you need to want it. And if all those 4 pillars are fulfilled, you can start reflecting on the first baby step it is for you, if you feel like you can't do that alone.
Could you just repeat that? So you said the right time.
The right time, you have to be committed, or you should be committed. You need to believe in what you want to change towards to, and you really need to want it. Because change is a process and a progress that might require some uncomfortable situations here and there, and it just brings you towards your own stretch zone. And if you're not committed, and if you're not really wanting it, and if you don't believe that this can be your own future, and if it's the wrong timing because you're busy with something, or you just turn out to be a mother or something, then the success rate is very little or not as big as otherwise.
Can I just pick you up on that point about timing? Because in my experience, and the impression I get from other people, is that there's never a right time, or perhaps turning it around another way, there's always a reason not to do something. So I'm always too busy. I'm always in the middle of the project. I've always got the parenting thing to do. I've always got, whatever it is, there's always something. So I was going to say, how do you decide that it's the right time? How do you decide perhaps that it's not a wrong time to be doing this?
I do think you feel it. I do think if you can still cope with it and if you can still like manage it and push it towards like solving it later, it's probably not as the demand of change isn't that high. But if you feel like it's becoming the number one struggle in your life and all you do is think about it, it's maybe something that wants some attention. And it's maybe like the world and the guidance saying you to just put it, everything else aside, to just give it the time and think of it.
There might be some people who are listening to this who think, but I never have time. So, people who maybe they're in your situation where they've got a young child. I mean, is there no hope for these people?
There is hope, because I don't have time as a limiting belief, or is a belief, not necessarily limiting. It can be very supporting in certain situations, but I don't have time as a belief people carry inside of us. And it's a choice to believe in that and to live that way or not, and make room for things. Because in reality, there's always time if we want it.
So then it not being the right time doesn't mean an absence of time. It just means it might not be the right point in life to be doing it. And that's not to do with time. So
yeah, that might have been my lack of native English explaining it wrongly. Thanks.
No, that's fine. I'd just like to maybe ask the question again, though. So how do you know that it is the right time or not the wrong time? I mean, how do you know that you shouldn't just be getting on and doing this now?
How a person would know that this is the right time right now. So, for instance, if you find yourself struggling with something, not knowing what to do in a certain life situation, it naturally grows if it requires attention. So the feeling you have, you're able to kind of tone it down or not allow it to become a big part in your life. It's probably okay for you for the time being. Or sometimes things resolve on their own. But if it doesn't stop, and if it's nagging on you for years and it becomes bigger and louder, and the pain you feel and the struggle you're in is excessively growing, and it's just like a snail crawling into all of the aspects of your life, and it's starting to spread consequences. You see, like for instance, consequences I was dealing that I felt my social life wasn't happening anymore. It was like hiding in my own place. So if you see things like that, you can choose to make time for it unless you're okay with the consequences it comes with.
Where does the dividing line sit between intuition and analysis? I'm a very analytical person, and
me too.
I sometimes find that I kind of get to a place where I have to look at something from every single angle before I find what I think is the, quote unquote, right answer. How do you know when to kind of stop analysing and to let intuition take over? Or in fact, the other way, how do you know when analysis is the right addition to the intuition?
Generally speaking, I think we are given both options. And I do think there is no either or. So I think in an ideal world, we are able just to allow both sides and both values lay in and just have our own stake and piece in a big decision or in a big whatever. So, for instance, me moving to a new place now here in Germany, I had this very strong intuition and the strong guidance to move to that particular region. But it also came with some points that I felt like I needed to analyze, like, all right, how far is that away from my husband's work? How can we manage that? How much extra costs are related to that? So those are all things that my brain and my analysis would take to. But feeling that the place where I wanted to live was that particular region was the other part of the intuition I allowed in towards the overall decision making. So I don't think there is either or. I do think there's always a combination of both. And we do live, and I found myself in that, like I felt like 35 years or 30 years at least, being 100% analytical. My university course of informatics and computer science really helped me to become a very structured and analytical person. But I always felt like there were limits, and I was missing this deep, satisfying feeling when I made 100% analytical decision. And so a good combination of both.
So it sounds like you're almost trying to get the analytical side and the intuitive side to agree with one another.
Oh my God, yes, because that is exactly what you're saying. This is where the heart and the mind is aligned, and then everything is possible. Perfect. Yes, good conclusion.
If you've been through this period of self-reflection and you've got a better idea of your own limiting beliefs and your values, and you're beginning to feel more intuitive about things, I mean, how do you interpret what you found out in terms of what you do with it?
How do I interpret what I do with things about it? Can you rephrase that question? I don't think I understand.
So someone comes to you in a place of dissatisfaction with their career, where they're working, that sort of thing, and you take them through this process where they understand themselves, they understand their own limiting beliefs, they understand their own values, they start to develop more their feeling of intuition, so they're more in touch with what makes them tick and where they would be happier. What do they do with all that information?
It's their choice. I can't tell them.
Okay, so what's the first step that someone takes once they've got all this information in order to get themselves to a place where whatever they're doing fits in with all of that?
So if, for instance, the situation is such that the person is aiming for a work-related change, looking for a new job or something like that, and he wants to undergo some improvements with that regard, and he has done the analytic work, and he's dig down to his own intuition, and it tells him or it tells her to change the company and to do something with kids. That's first of all a piece of information. It's just like the dashboard of our own car gives us information and we choose to change the oil or not. It's up to us. So that information is up to that person as well. And I personally keep saying, if my intuition directs me towards the same thing at least 3 times, I'm finally beginning to give it attention, because intuition also is there's a lot of data adding up to it. And I slowly begin to give it attention. And then if that is a dramatic change, like change the whole profession or only move to another country or whatever the intuition is coming forward with, it is the choice. And it's again towards back to the points of I believe in it, I want it, I feel committed to it, and I feel that's right for me right now and the point of life where I am. And then small baby steps can be taken towards that new life scenario that the intuition has been provided to us.
This point about intuition, it's a really important one, isn't it? Because I can see how you might be confused between intuition and a sort of a feeling of the grass is always greener. Someone tells you what they do and you think, oh, wow, that sounds really interesting. That sort of perked me up. Wow, that sounds much more interesting than my job. But that doesn't necessarily mean that intuitively you have figured out that is really right for you. It's more that it sounds better than where you are at the moment.
Intuition comes back. Intuition, the message you get through intuition will repeat itself until you kind of feel it. So I believe many of us have a childhood dream. They wanted to become someone early in their life, but they never went for it because life got them somewhere else, which is okay as well. But sometimes those dreams are still very active in people. What I keep saying, that over decades and centuries and long years, the intuition continues to come back on the same point, if that is the way that you're supposed to give and that you're supposed to follow, So there's clarity, but it's not as instant as we're used to at the moment. It just takes a little bit more time and more reflection to see what is actually coming back.
This idea of reflecting on what you liked as a child and what your dreams were as a child, it's another thing that kind of recurs. And I guess when you're a child, no child thinks, hey, I'm going to grow up to be a lawyer, or hey, I'm going to grow up to be a management accountant, because most children don't actually know what on earth that means. So it's more, oh, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a fireman, or something like that. But I suppose what you can do is, rather than focusing on I want to be a ... focus on what it was about the characteristics of that ... that first drew you to it. And maybe there are aspects of being a lawyer or a management accountant that do satisfy those.
Totally. I do believe people who wanted to be a vet, they just have a very strong love for animals and they care for animals. And maybe it's the characteristics of caring for someone that is driving them towards becoming a vet, but they find caring for someone or animals in other job roles as well, that maybe are easier in the later point, mid of their lives, to turn towards too. Is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah, that sums it up very well.
Yeah. Okay. Then I got you. Yeah.
Mareike, I think this is a subject which we've literally only just sort of scratched the surface on, but hopefully it's given people something to think about. If people are interested in taking this further, do you have any recommended books, tools, resources that people can look at to start to explore these sorts of themes a little bit more?
The greatest clarity on this huge field of finding your own authentic and intuition and guidance that comes out of you, I got was from a book called New Species. It's been written by Sherry Carter Scott. She's an American. And this book is all about, imagining what a new species would look like if only we would all live based on our intuition. And I just really loved it. And if anyone feels like, improving things, starting with our toddlers and creating and making them towards the people that kind of are connected to their intuition, in addition to the analytical skills, and the possibility we can create the world towards to it is just beautifully described in there. It's very motivating on going towards this way.
Fantastic. Excellent. I'll look out for that. I've not come across that one. And in terms of where people can find you and get a hold of you, where's the best place that they can do that?
I've got a website, mareikeschoenig.de. I've got an Instagram channel. That's instagram.com/Mareike Schoenig Coaching, likewise for Facebook. And I also have got a LinkedIn website. And in addition to all of that, I host a podcast. The name of the podcast is Miracle of Coaching. And that is the unique opportunity to listen to unedited and very raw and pure coaching conversations I have with people, because I believe with reflecting and self-reflection comes from real conversations, just like what we're having here right now. That was a very beautiful one, Jeremy. That is what I'm doing with them. It's just like on particular topics with clients who just want to get unstuck towards a certain goal they're having in mind. And it probably reflects on many other people when they listen to it as well.
Fabulous. Well, the podcast sounds very interesting. I'll definitely take a listen. Mareike, I'll link to all that in the show notes. Some absolutely fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was amazing. I loved it. Thank you.
Well, hope you enjoyed that episode. We went into some pretty deep stuff there with Mareike. But there was so much sense to what she was saying about how it really is about getting in touch with your own intuition, trusting your own feelings, allowing yourself to have those feelings to work out instinctively what is going to make you happy. For me, I had a real aha moment when we started talking about the relationship between being analytical and being intuitive, and the kind of the agreement, I suppose, that Mareike and I reached, that it was really about finding a compromise between the two. For someone who, as regular listeners know, is very analytical, and sometimes I think I let that analysis get in the way of things, knowing that there is a way to find a compromise between being an analytical and being intuitive, I felt that was very positive for me, and it's something that I can start to learn how not to let being analytical get in the way of tapping into my own feelings themselves. So there was a lot of stuff in there, but I hope that if you are one of those people who feels like your job or your career just really isn't doing it for you, it's not making you fulfilled, it's not leaving you satisfied, then this gives you a starting point to start to get in touch with your intuition and work out just what is going wrong. If you go to changeworklife.com/83 for episode 83, then you'll find the show notes there with the transcript of the interview, a summary of everything we've talked about, links to the resources that we've mentioned, and also contact details for how you can get in touch with Mareike and find her online. You'll also find buttons on that page where you can share the episode on your choice of social media, and I'd love it if you would. There's so much stuff in here. Someone you know is going to find this valuable, so share it with them. Help someone out. It would mean the world to me if you would share this episode, and let's help more people find their dream career. There's another great interview coming your way next week, so if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show, and I can't wait to see you next week. Cheers. Bye.